Welcome in everyone to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm your host, Kevin McPherson. We've been absent. We've been gone for a day and a half, so it's good to be back on here. Got an intel segment for you here. Several pieces of information I think is really, intrinsic to what John Calipari is doing in terms of his recruiting, not just 26, where we know there's a fast track scheduling visits. 4 of those on public visit dates. We know they're efforting at least 4 or 5 more official visits. We've gone through some of those names. That's 2026. So today we're looking at really kind of past that in 2027. There is some connectivity to 2026 we're going to talk about today. We're going to go all the way down to class of 3030 and some of our talking points today. That's a lot of stuff going on, but current Hogs as well. We know the team was due back. School started yesterday. Back on the hill, and you've got returning Razorbacks, and we got some recent elite camp updates, things some intel we got from another NBA scout in terms of Razorbacks that participated. JJ Andrews yesterday in the Big Apple in New York City, Rucker Park in Harlem, in Manhattan, famous, going back decades. It's probably the most known outcore court in terms of the great players that have come through there. Dr. J, Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the list goes on. Stephen Marbury, Starbury, if you remember, the former Georgia Tech one and done. There's a lot more, but J.J. Andrews got his turn at Rucker Park last night. John Wall followed Calipari, was committed to Calipari when Cal was at Memphis. And the first year when he took the job at Kentucky, Wall was to be an incoming freshman. So he just followed Cal to Kentucky, and the rest is history. Today, John Wall announces his retirement. We're going to talk a little bit about that and how that might play in with Arkansas. Recent class of 2028 Arkansas offer Anthony Sprat Jr. Had a source. This will be intel for you. That's a pretty impressive source, and it's pretty lofty player comparison, a player comp in the NBA. And it just kind of fits into the narrative of why Calipari offered a player that's the youngest he's ever offered. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. So we got several things to jump into here. So let's get right to it. Carter Knox and Malik Thomas. We know they were 2 of the Razorbacks that took part in that prestigious CP3 Jason Tatum elite camp, guards and wings camp a few weeks ago. They were back at camping this past week, going into the weekend. Nike Skills Academy. As soon as that college roster was released, I grabbed that sucker and put it out on social media on X, that listing both Knox and Thomas among just a very few college players that were invited. And so they took part in that. We know that they got good reviews coming out of CP3 Jason Tatum. The same thing here, and a source says both of these guys, in a nutshell, he said, let me get it right here. Both are NBA talents. Both are worthy pro prospects. Both are NBA talents. Both are worthy pro prospects. So this is a thing when we talk Carter Knox, right? He tested the NBA draft waters before withdrawing, pulling out of the draft process, coming back to Arkansas. Everyone knew that was going to happen after a true freshman season last year, where he really came on the second half of the season, really helped propel Arkansas. One of the best players on the team, one of the best freshmen in the country by March, to get into the Sweet 16 and so close to an Elite 8. And then we've heard coming out of that draft process that he did good enough at the combine, some of these things where folks knew he needed to come back, but that he's on a trajectory. He's like a first round value after year 2. But you have to keep proving yourself, right? That's the look at it in real time. That's a snapshot in time, and you just keep moving forward, and you see, does a player continue to progress, maintain on that track? Do they slip? Is there slippage? What those kinds of things. And for Carter Knox, so far, no. Remember, my NBA scout from the CP3 Jason Tatum camp, I came in with intel saying, look, this guy is trending as an NBA first round pick. Now I've got another scout after this most recent event still referring to him as an NBA worthy guy. So you got to think, is it a settled thing? No, of course not. You've got a season where anything can happen. You hope he stays healthy. You hope that he progresses and continues to show that he's worthy of that. But so far, so good. Malik Thomas, who got rave reviews from an NBA scout because of his shooting at CP3, Jason Tatum in this Nike skills setting. Again, another scout saying that he's an NBA talent worthy of as a pro worthy of being a pro prospect. And so you're talking about an incoming true freshman. Now, same scenario. We don't know if he'll be a one and done. We think he's an eventual NBA player and a draft pick and likely a first rounder. We think that about Carter Knox. They have to continue to put up or shut up, and they have to put up production, efficiency. They'd be good teammates, all these things. A lot of what goes into these assessments, too, is not just what scouts see on the court. This is something else that I was reminded of when I talked to this NBA scout about both of these players. They're looking at everything, body language between drills, how they take instructions and mentorship. How attentive are they? You look at Malik Thomas, we were giving you source information from folks going back to limited summer practice saying he was hinging on every one of Calipari's words, just locked in. Remember, one of the talking points, and you continue to hear that these are the things that are going on. I put out some photos from this very camp after I announced the roster and that these two guys were on the roster. Well, Nike EYB, Elite Youth Basketball, put it out, and then I put it out immediately, just copy and pasted the image of the roster, put it on social media. But then a couple of days later, I put out photos of both Knox and Thomas at this event, and you see Thomas kind of front and center, paying attention to whatever's going on in there, locked in. And so these are the good things, because the scout reminded me, aside from what they do on the court, you're really paying attention again to body language. How tuned in are they? Are they, when they get an instruction, do they follow through the next time when they run through a rep? Those kinds of things. They go so much about being a pro, because there's a lot of talented players. Are you low maintenance? Are you coachable? Are you on time? Are you a good teammate? All these things, and those things translate in more than one way. Again, what you see, how you see players interact in the flow of action, in timeouts and huddles, again, when they're being coached up, in other scenarios, how they carry themselves and comport themselves off the court, all these things. And so to hear scouts continue to praise Arkansas players, it's no surprise, because Calipari, his process is identifying players that make sense, that he can help get to the next level. What does he say? If you're into clubbing, chasing, running it, all that stuff, this isn't the place for you. He wants players that are serious about being pros. His track record is the best among college coaches. So there should be no surprise here. The only thing is, it's worth talking about because it's the most recent situation where we're getting good feedback. And so you expect it in some ways, but until you hear it, you're not sure, are they progressing like you hope they do? And now you're getting more and more bullets and put to load in to say, yeah, they're on track. So it's really good stuff there. J.J. Andrews, committed to Arkansas, class of 2026, a five-star recruit. I've got him ranked in my top 5 and my top 25, 4th overall player. He was camping with these same guys at CP3 Jason Tatum a few weeks ago. Billy Richmond III, incoming, returning sophomore wing, was also at CP3 Jason Tatum. He was not at the Nike Skills Academy this past weekend. But J.J. Andrews, although he wasn't there, Skills Academy for the high school players is upcoming. But J.J. was also busy on Monday. He spent time in New York through the weekend. He arrived over the weekend, and then on Monday he participated in the Slam Summer Classic, which is again at Rucker Park. It's not one of those. It's an all-star kind of event. You had Tyron Stokes, Jordan Smith Jr., multiple Arkansas targets spanning multiple classes. Anderson Diaz out of 2027, a point guard in the New York City area that Arkansas Calipari just recently extended an offer to. And so many players, again, that Arkansas has either mildly recruited, pursued, and then backed off, but some of them, they're really in it to still try to get it done. And J.J. Andrews took part in that effectively an all-star game, again, on the Rucker Park, famous, the Dr. J games where people are hanging off the buildings surrounding the park, watching the action. It's one of those iconic places. And so to be invited for this and get to take part in it, it's a big honor. It's just the latest of a lot for JJ, who's put together, quite a resume in the spring and summer. Arkansas got him committed in May. Perfect timing, because now the guy's made his case as, if not one of the top 5 or 10 players in the country, maybe that he's the best. He was the MVP, winning a second consecutive Nike Beach Jam, the Pinnacle championship. So he comes out and, I watched the game from beginning to finish. It was a 4-quarter game. It's mostly highlight type of stuff. Defense is not at a premium. There's not much of that. But JJ in his minutes did good stuff. He had a putback off a missed shot, just a putback layup, obviously on his left side. He got out in transition, and Tyron Stokes, who was named MVP of this game, the number 1 player overall when you look at class of 2026. And then ESPN's recent top 25, regardless of class, he's the number 1 overall player in that. But Tyron Stokes dimes to JJ in transition, alley-oop pass, lob pass for a dunk in transition. Then JJ had a couple of really, I think his two best plays came later. He had a putback on a missed three-point shot on a step back by Deron Rippey Jr., a five-star guard out of the New York area, plays at Blair Academy in New Jersey. But he was short on that shot. It comes up off the rim, and JJ swoops in for a left-hand smash. So he rocked the rim on the putback. And then JJ got a defensive rebound on one end later when the game got tight in the fourth quarter. I think it was a 5 or 7 point game. He got a defensive rebound, walked the ball up, took his man one-on-one, went left. He likes to go left. What I call the slash, clash, and cash game. It's exactly what he did. Went left, bullied his defender, got to the rim, finished through contact going left off the glass, basically a layup, and one. He hits the free throw, and it extended that close margin lead a little bit further out with that 3-point play. And I think from that moment on, his team pushed out to a double-digit advantage and ended up winning going away. So he made a big play there. This guy is a winner. He talks about, you're not worried about stats in a game like this, where everybody's kind of selfish. I mean, he's always going to play the right way. He's probably the guy, when I looked at that game on either team, that played the least amount of selfish basketball. Tyron Stokes was out there flirting with trying to get a triple-double, I guess. I don't know what his final stats were. He had a lot of dimes, but he took it upon himself, too, to force some stuff, just like everybody else did, getting their own shots up, not J.J. Andrews. So J.J. with a good performance. And by the way, speaking of that top 25 overall, regardless of class, that ESPN put out, J.J. comes in at number 16 in that. So here's a guy that's number 4 on my list, and Jonathan Wasserman, the NBA draft guru over at Bleacher Report and NBA.com, has JJ as the 4th overall pick in the 2027 draft, which means he would be a one and done and then going 4th overall. So his slot mirrors where I have him in his class. So effectively we had both agreed, because the top 3 players that Wasserman has in his draft are also class of 2026 guys. So they're not quite the same comparison, but it's close. But JJ 16th overall according to ESPN, regardless of class. So as far as I know, ESPN and myself and the composite rankings, which is an aggregate of the 3 major services now that On3 and Rivals are combined, those are the only 5-star evaluations. 247 Sports has him really up there, I think 13th, but they still have him as a 4-star. And then On3 has him outside the top 20, I think 24th and a 4-star. So go figure. But JJ Andrews last night kept on keeping on and doing what he does, and it's all good stuff. All right, let's move on. We've got more intel. I thought the intel on Carter Knox and Malik Thomas was really good. I like hearing that stuff coming from an NBA scout. It just continues that momentum for those guys as they build not only their individual profiles, but then it needs to translate in the team stuff. I know it will with JJ Andrews. I've seen it already with Carter Knox. I believe it will with Malik Thomas. And so Calipari just keeps feeding the monster, right? He's off to a great start in 2026. We've talked a lot about our confidence level for Calipari. We're not going to go through that today. We will later this week in terms of the priority 2026 guys, where Arkansas is tracking there, what that looks like, and that Arkansas is in the top 2 or 3 for several guys. Calipari in the end is going to end up getting at least 2 more guys out of that class to put with JJ that everybody's going to be pleased with, at least 2 more. And maybe more. We'll see what happens. They get in late on some guys. We've gone through those names in recent episodes. Go check them out. We'll revisit that as soon as tomorrow and go back through some of that stuff. But I do want to get a little bit in class of 2026 today. We had intel for you back when Baba Aladdin, who was the number 1 player in class of 2027, 6'10", maybe pushing 6'11", combo forward, stretch 4, probably a 3-4 at the NBA level. And we've made the Evan Mobley potential comparisons, NBA star with the Cleveland Cavs. But we talked about Aladdin and the fact that once he reclassed, this was a situation that Calipari had a plan for this. He was prepared for this. And he's been prioritizing and making him front and center. We brought you more intel that Arkansas and Aladdin are working to finalize visit dates. We know that he's going to visit the home state school. He's from Silver Springs, Maryland. We know he's going to visit the home state school, Maryland. Gonzaga's one of the schools. There'll be others involved, but Arkansas is working to finalize it. All right, that's stuff we've already covered. But when we talked about, Arkansas offered him, in class of 2027, if not the first offer for that class, right there among the first. Arkansas made the first contact, direct contact when they could. Calipari, June 15th, stroke of midnight, and Arkansas had the offer out. So all that stuff is what we've covered. But when I talk about Calipari's plan, it's this idea that he pursued this player with such intensity, in the sense of it's in Calipari's wheelhouse for players to reclass and him pursue. He's done it since he's been at Arkansas. For more than one player. This is just the next one in that sense. So it's not anything novel. Here's the intel today. We caught you up to speed on what we've already talked about. The intel today is Calipari's also been prioritizing class of 2027, top 5 national guy, arguably the top player now that Aladattin's moved to 2026. CJ Rosser, 6'9", another stretch 4. There are a lot of similarities between him and Aladattin. He's out of Mount Rocky, North Carolina. We started giving you intel about Calipari pursuing him back in May at Nike EYBL session play in Memphis. I was there, put video out of Calipari and Chin Coleman courtside watching Rosser play, and talked about that. We've talked about him on multiple segments. Now, arguably the top player in that class, again, similar position-wise. He's, if you look at the rankings right now, I think ESPN has him 4th, 247 Sports 3rd, and the composite he's number 2. So you get the picture. There are comparisons between both players. I've now got a piggyback on intel with Rosser that's tied to Aladattin. That Calipari's plan was recruiting both as though they would be in separate classes for weeks, if not months. In other words, back in May, when he was courtside watching Rosser, he had an idea back then that he would be recruiting him for that class, Aladattin for moving to 2026. And so even though I put a tweet out during Nike Peach Jam that there'd been stirring around for a couple of weeks that Aladattin might reclass. And then we learned a few weeks later that he was going to do it. So all that's very recent in terms of how it went public and how, folks actually talking about it on the surface. But buried beneath that surface were, were discussions for months that this is probably going to happen. And Calipari has not been on the outside looking in with that information. So he's been pursuing both. So when he was watching Rosser back in May, I'm told he already knew that would be a May or 2027 recruit, and that Aladattin would likely be 26. And so it becomes a situation. Then you say, well, what does that matter? It matters because a lot of times when you're recruiting the same position, Calipari's got a track record of effectively bringing in multiple guys that play the same position. But when you're maybe battling for the top spot in your class for a similar position, it might be an easier sell or make more sense for you if you know one guy's going to reclass, and now you're kind of your efforts step up in terms of how you sell it to both of them. Because now you're not selling you'll play together in year one. Now you're selling a different vision. And so it may make more sense for those players. It gives you maybe a head start. I don't know how many other high major coaches knew about that, but Calipari did, I'm told. That's what my source is. So I find that, advantageous for Calipari as he pursues both players, because that's a different dynamic in how because they're both, basically barring an injury or some crazy unforeseen something, they're both going to track as one and dones, and it puts them not competing for each other for playing time, exposure, and then, how they go in the draft. They would, in this scenario, go in separate drafts as well. So again, all of that I think is advantageous to Calipari if he knew about it well before the rest of us did. And those things happen, but to have that confirmed for me, I thought was very interesting. All right, let's continue to move on here. I'm going to throw in real quick. Let's talk about the John Wall retirement. Again, I mentioned earlier, Wall was committed to Calipari when he was the head coach at Memphis. He takes the Kentucky job, I think, for the 2000-2001 season, I believe, or was it 2009, 2010 maybe, was Calipari's first season at Kentucky. It's one of those, but John Wall came with him and was a true freshman, one and done in that lone season for Calipari before going in, and having an all-pro career, 5 seasons of all-pro. He's been injured and missed the last several years, really been off the radar, but he's one of the top guards and playmakers in the league for several years there. And he was a household name in terms of the NBA and his value as a player, what he brought to the court. most of his seasons excelling with the Washington Wizards. Later on, he was with the Rockets for a season and the Clippers. Again, he's been a guy that has been injured and missed a lot of time lately. He went ahead and formally announced his retirement. Yeah, it was 2009 and 2010 when he was a freshman for Calipari, so at Kentucky. So that was the year. I got that a little mixed up. But here's something that's interesting. I have already got people reaching out to me because when his farewell video from pro basketball and his retirement, he says he's stepping away from the court, but he's not finished with basketball, which opens up a Pandora's box of speculation, right? Obviously. And the Cal ties and the fact that he was one of Cal's first big stars at Kentucky. He's a Cal guy. You know how Cal embraces his guys. He does it from day one when he starts building those recruitment profiles. He spends a lot of time with most of his recruits that he lands. It's not as many of these, what we've talked about lately, these get in late kind of situations. And it starts then. And he starts selling the idea that I'm about you and we'll have success as long as I'm helping you. He's one of the first coaches to view it that way, to see players beyond just student athletes, but their professional potential, the one and done era. He did all of that stuff that we're now seeing more and more as a norm. Took a lot of criticism for, but it's always been about players. And this is a guy, think of it in those terms, and one of Cal's, again, one of the centerpieces of his career, of many, but there are a lot. Is there, what does involvement in basketball look like after you stop playing? Could there be a path to helping Cal out, working with Cal? Where is Cal the head coach? He's at Arkansas. So is there a connection potentially there professionally or in some consultant role? I already have people throwing out things, and I'm trying to dive into that. This announcement happened just today, and learn more about it. But we bring it up now just because if you go back to when Cal was hired, Joe Johnson attended that press conference. Now, that wasn't a Cal player. Joe Johnson was a sophomore in 2000, 2001 when Cal took over first year out of the NBA. He'd been at UMass, had great success there. NBA head coach of the New Jersey Nets. Actually got the Nets to the playoffs in one of the seasons he was there. I think at least one. But then took the Memphis job. And so Cal, I think, was in year one when Joe Johnson was a sophomore at Arkansas, and Memphis was still on the schedule from the previous series of games that they played when Nolan Richardson was Nolan Richardson was still there. So it was obviously his series of games, but Calipari comes in. It was Tick Price, I think, was the head coach, and that's what I was trying to say, who had organized with Nolan a series of games between the two schools. So Calipari inherits part of the schedule. He gets Memphis, Arkansas hosts him in Fayetteville. Arkansas won that game, and pretty soon after that, Calipari got Arkansas off the schedule. You remember all of that for Memphis. But Joe Johnson helped Arkansas win. It was a balanced game. I think he had 12 points in that one. Helped Arkansas beat Calipari. But Calipari knows basketball players outside his own guys. He's got relationships all over the map and ties to everybody in one way or another. Most of them are positive and a lot of respect out there. But Joe Johnson's one of those guys he's fond of. And when he had his hiring ceremony in Fayetteville, I was there at Bud Walton Arena back in April. It was early April last year. God, it's been barely more than a year. It seems like more than that. But Joe Johnson was there, and there was some back and forth, and we started hearing immediately from good sources that there was real traction to Joe Johnson somehow being involved in helping Calipari with this program, either as some kind of consultant, special assistant, all of that. Joe Johnson's one of those guys who's still 40 plus, not officially retired from basketball, still playing on some pro levels and, competitive. And so he's just not done that. But I kept hearing it. In fact, it was a few months ago, I heard that there may be some down low, off the radar involvement with Joe Johnson in the program that's not on the books. I mean, I continue to hear it from people who wouldn't just say that. It's not rumor kind of stuff. They're basketball people. And when you keep hearing stuff like that, there's a lot of smoke. You wonder, all right, so here's a guy that's not a Calipari guy, and there's been all of that. So would it surprise me to hear if there's any legs to it or any validity that a John Wall might be interested in teaming up with Cal and doing something at Arkansas? I mean, he brought Tyler Ulis, a different scenario. Ulis was with Cal at Kentucky, already getting in the coaching game. Ulis is now at Arkansas, one of Cal's guys in one of those unforgettable seasons in the 2010s there and about the midway point. But, who knows? I'd use the Joe Johnson thing, though, just because that thing had legs forever, and I'm still not 100% sure that there's not something down the road there. So why wouldn't a John Wall, why wouldn't Cal want that if he could do it? Now, there's all kinds of opportunities probably for Wall, obviously. And who knows what that could be? Maybe he's a broadcaster, play-by-play guy. Maybe he's going to be a podcaster. There's all kinds of stuff and doors that'll open for him if he wants them to. But the Calipari part of it's intriguing just to throw out there as a what if. We're not trying to tell you anything right now has any legs or we're signaling anything. Just I'm already starting to field some feelers from people about, oh, I heard this, or maybe this is, maybe there's some truth to this, or, those kind of things. So we'll keep an eye on it. We'll talk more about it if it warrants. It's intriguing to talk about. Just over 25 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. If you haven't done it already, please hit subscribe, like, and share. We appreciate that. It helps us out. Real quick, I got two more things really to get into right now, maybe three. But real quick, Hogs at Memphis. We heard this was going to happen, and there's a charity exhibition game, St. Jude's. Calipari's went on a podcast with Penny Hardaway back in May. It wasn't released, I don't think, until late June or early July, whenever that was, 2 cent or whatever it's called. And Calipari said, "Yeah, I want to do the game, but I want to bring back my former Memphis players to be honored for that game. He also wants it to make sure that it's a game that'll be televised, get some kind of national recognition. That's part of it. But reporting by Hitman Hoops, which is I'm familiar with that account. They talk a lot about Memphis basketball and sometimes break stuff. Sometimes it's sound and reliable, sometimes not so much. We'll find out here, but we know it's not like they're making this up out of whole cloth. We know Calipari's on the record with Penny talking about that game and trying to get things finalized. Well, the date is what Hitman Hoops put out yesterday, October 28th. That's a Tuesday night in Memphis. And so that's about the time you're finished. You're playing your 2 exhibition games. Your season opener at Bud Walton Arena against Southern of the SWAC conference is November 3rd. So that's, a few days before that. And so one of the other things that Hitman Hoops followed up with was a separate tweet, piggybacking off the date that it announced, saying this is in flux. It may be flexible. And part of that is negotiating with ESPN or whoever might televise it to get it, maybe the date could change there. So that was the idea there. So just a little, morsel of intel stuff here. It's not my information. It's someone else's intel. It's out publicly now, only to say that, we expect that game to happen. Now, if October 28th is the date, now it's out there. We'll see if that changes and we'll follow up if it does. Real quick, I found this really interesting. We've had a lot of coverage on Anthony Sprat going back to last week. I broke the news last Monday. After weeks of telling you it was coming, and John Calipari was telling people this would be the soonest, earliest I've ever offered a player. Sure enough, Anthony Sprat Jr., class of 2028, 6'6" wing and a Benton. Sure enough, he gets the offer from Arkansas and Calipari. And so we put that report out last Monday, so 8 days ago. And since that time, I've been dropping some little quotes that he gave me about talking with Cal. Then I saw him at Isaiah Joe Darrell make an elite camp on Saturday, did an interview with him, put that out on my Twitter account, which was, we talked about a multitude of things. It was a good interview, and he talked about the experience, getting that again with that offer from Cal. And this time you got to hear his voice, see his eye, his tones and inflections and his reactions to it as he's explaining it and describing it. So it's a pretty good thing. So we've been kind of really heavily saturated with Anthony Sprat Jr. news. I mean, it's a big deal. Again, class of 2028, 15 years old. He's just starting classes at Benton High School this week as a sophomore. He was a ninth grader that was there last year and helped the team win the 5A state title. So it's not like it's his first year in high school, but it's his first week as a 10th grader, and the offer came technically in between there. So again, if that's the earliest, that's what Cal thinks. All right, we've reported all that. Something interesting came across me today. Got a source reach out to me and say, you know what? Really good coverage on Sprat. I got to tell you something though. This is one of my basketball connected guys. Said basically, I'm going to phrase this the right way. In a conversation, let's put it this way, in a conversation with one of the top directors for Team USA Junior National Basketball. So how the junior national team, you start looking around the board every summer, and you're seeing guys like Anthony Black recently, Darius Acuff Jr., other high school players that are turning hogs or whatever, taking part. And they're playing several years in these events in the spring and summer, and then they go to those mini camps that are year-round in Colorado Springs. And so a lot of Arkansas's top targets, it's not just about the shoe circuits and it's not just about all-star camps and these events. A lot of that's Team USA stuff. Moses Moody was a part of that. A lot of guys. So when you hear Anthony Sprat getting compliments and pro player comps from one of the top level guys at Team USA Junior National, it's a big deal. Now it remains to be seen how soon they invite him to any mini camps or maybe to be involved in their process. But this comp that came out came from, I'm told it came from Don Showalter, who's the director of coaching development for Team USA basketball, the whole the whole thing. And then he said that Anthony Sprat Jr. reminds him of a young Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum. Now think about that. This is an all-pro guy, been in the conversation for several years as a league MVP, helped Boston to its first title of, the Lakers and the Celtics, right? The two most storied programs all time. Been a dry spell for the Celtics until 2 years ago, prior to Isaiah Joe and Jalen Williams helping the OKC Thunder to this NBA title. The year before that, it was Jason Tatum and the Celtics. But Tatum, just like Anthony Sprat Jr., St. Louis, Sprat Jr. is Arkansas. Tatum is a St. Louis guy. They both came through. They were top performers in the Brad Bill Elite program that plays on Nike EYBL. Of course, Tatum ends up going to Duke and starring there, and then going quickly to the NBA. And Duke's a program after we know about the Arkansas offer. We've talked about it. John Shire's been courtside at Nike Peach Jam to watch Anthony Sprat Jr. So there's a lot of stuff when you start making these comparisons that kind of tie back. If Don Showalter with Team USA is making comparisons to Jason Tatum, where's that coming from? I don't know where that's coming from, but maybe it's from a guy like John Shire, who's been in that Duke program and is obviously familiar with Tatum and is recruiting, Anthony Sprat Jr. It could be somebody else, but it's just get your wheels turning. The more we bring intel, the more we learn. The more things start to add up. You say, well, why is Calipari offering an in-state kid that soon, or anybody? Well, when you're starting to hear things like that, we'll see what happens. There's a long ways to go. Even in the interview I did with Sprat over the weekend, he says, I've got a lot of years left at this level. Let's see what offers I get and where I go. I mean, he pretty mature response. You need to go check that if you haven't seen it already. And I'll tease this. I've got a big article coming out, a recruiting article about Sprat, and some of these talking points will be included. His stats on E15, Nike E15 this year, some other stuff, how he elevated his three-point shooting. It's going to be an in-depth of one of those deep dives that I do. And there'll be another surprise about this article and where it appears. I'll just tease that for now, or it should be. We'll see if it actually happens that way or another way, the usual way. But I thought that was really interesting information on Anthony Sprat Jr. That's a heavy compliment. Real quick, I want to throw this in here. Also at the Isaiah Joe, Daryl Macon Shoot Elite Camp over the weekend here in the 501. Class of 2030, 6'5", Justin Peppers, 6'5" wing, class of 3030. He's going into the 8th grade. He's out of Whitehall. The kid's got math hops. He's got surprisingly good skill for his age. He's strong. If you look at him, sizing him up with other top level players in the state that are in his size range, it's not like you look at him and go, oh, look at that baby face and that scrawny frame, or, yeah, he may be pushing 6'4", 6'5", but he's not the same as these other guys. No, he blends right in and he can play, man. This dude is going to be maybe one of those next guys, maybe one of those Cal early offer guys. Justin Peppers, don't forget the name. His mom played basketball at the University of Arkansas. His family is littered with high-level athletes. It's in the genes. We talked J.J. Andrews and how he came by it honestly. It's in the DNA. This is a similar story here with Justin Peppers. So don't forget the name, class of 2030, just going into 8th grade. He may be the next one. Now, we track these things. Sometimes these things don't take hold. But, man, looking at him right now, and I put some highlights out of some of his stuff he was doing on the court in the drill work Saturday. If you haven't seen that, go to my X/Twitter page. You can find that. Again, I posted that in the last few days. All right, nearly 35 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm going to sign off. We're really going to jump back in very soon to class of 2026 with more intel for you. And as Arkansas continues to try to stack these visits, we know they're upcoming. We know the team's back on campus. We're going to have all kinds of stuff we're going to get into. We love bringing stuff that you can't get anywhere else because you can't. I'm glad you're here to get it. Appreciate all of you. Take care of yourselves. Be good. See you soon.